Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Brad Hairston here. Welcome to Transform Now. My guest today is Nicholas Lee, the CEO of Fujitsu Intelligence. Nicholas has been on the podcast before. It was way back in the pre-Gen AI days, which seems like a very long time ago, but it was only a couple of years. But he's got a really important and new and broader role at Fujitsu, which we will definitely talk about. And it includes both AI and quantum computing. So I look forward to delving into that. Nicholas, welcome back. Why don't you reintroduce yourself to our audience and talk about your new role?
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. This is, again, my second time. Obviously, for those that don't know about Fujitsu, we're one of the world's largest IT companies in the world, largest technology companies. I have the privilege of serving as the CEO for our Fujitsu Intelligence business, which is our premier data and AI organization across the Americas. And so, we solve, our approach is really to solve many of the customers' complex challenges. We've got a rich tapestry of IP. We're one of the top AI providers, number 5 in terms of AI patents. We've got immense talent around the AI pool. We spend a tremendous amount of investment dollars in terms of R&D around, AI. And then, we also make high performance computing. We have the world's fastest supercomputer. We've also got, new chips that are coming out for AI workloads. And then we've, got our quantum side of the house, which is, quantum inspired, quantum simulation, and true quantum based computers. So, we're able to harness a lot of that expertise with our clients in North America. And we really just try and solve these very complex problems, not just solve a point solution, but try and solve them at business scale. That's essentially who we are as a Fujitsu Intelligence organization. Be more than happy to dive into today's discussion.
And of course, you are now at the top of the pyramid and running this group as CEO, which is exciting. And congratulations, by the way. That's a great new opportunity for you this year. Why don't you tell us a little bit more just about Fujitsu Intelligence and your consulting approach to AI? What gives you guys kind of a unique approach to the market? There's obviously a lot of consultancies doing AI advisory work, but tell us about Fujitsu specifically.
Yeah, most consulting firms, they talk about AI as kind of a theoretical solution. I've been in the AI industry for probably 2 decades now. So it's nothing, net new. I've seen the kind of the evolution of AI over the last 2 decades. And really our focus is delivering enterprise grade, AI that transforms operations. And so it's not just let's die on the hill with a proof of concept. And it's really how do we leverage and build things that scale seamlessly across, business critical systems, and focusing on measurable impacts. I've spent a tremendous amount of time looking at what's the ROIs? How do we measure ROIs in terms of AI investments? And it's not a black and white kind of context. It's over the journey of AI. There's different set of KPIs that we typically try and derive, but our unique expertise, we have, very deep operations research, expertise, very deep data expertise coupled with the kind of tapestry that I mentioned in terms of our technological background. Really what we're trying to do is build solutions at scale that survive and thrive in a complex world of enterprise applications.
Okay. And looking back on the last year, there was so much activity among companies with regard to specifically Gen AI, a lot of piloting, POCs. Where did your clients, from your perspective, where did they need the most help last year with regard to AI? If you could talk about that, and then I'm also interested how you expect that to change this coming year.
Yeah, if we think about AI, maybe let's say, 2 years ago kind of concept, pre-Gen AI, most of them were, focusing on AI problems, and they knew kind of the problem space. They would go and get some data engineering skills and some data scientists. They'd go to a data lake and they would, essentially try and take the data they needed and build that into an application. And so, but they were doing that in a proof of concept construct. And oftentimes organizations that we worked with had this kind of glass ceiling that they couldn't, break through because they were stuck in kind of pilots. Even when you can solve these problems at, like let's say a multi-million-dollar proof of concept that you're able to, the business case and everything makes sense. We were able to save millions of dollars through this kind of application. Still trying to get that to scale across the enterprise has been the biggest challenge. So with our customers, really what we're looking at, and it's not, to me, it's about the practitioners that we bring to the table. It's about the tools and technology, our experience. We've worked with over 150 Fortune 500 companies over the last 5 years. And what I call it is more operational intelligence and predictive maintenance. The future is really like your decision autonomy and at scale. So if you can't get your AI pilots to scale, there's no real value. So in 2024, pre-gen AI, it was breaking through the glass ceilings. Once we broke through the glass ceilings, then it was like, how do we scale this across the enterprise? 2025 with Gen AI, I think is a leap in terms of the market. Those that, don't, essentially embrace the AI at scale will simply fall behind. And so we're helping clients kind of prepare and shift today. What does it mean to have a Gen AI environment that you're running against your workloads? We're treating AI as almost like a separate HR component. I've read recently, like IT groups are essentially going to become the new HR managers for AI workloads. And so how do you operate in that environment? What happens when you have many different business units that are investing in building Gen AI solutions? What's the technical debt that you're building around that? How do you scale and manage those? What are things like privacy, ethical use? What about confidentiality when people are throwing data into these AI systems? Like, how do we make sure that those that are, accessing it and benefiting from it, there's not a breach in terms of, so there's a whole wrapper that goes around this amazing technology that now we can see because it's very user friendly, but we can now help enterprises really scale. And then how do you manage that complexity over time? But it's exciting because the past AI projects that had so much hope, the future is really now because we're able to scale those across the enterprise.
That's interesting. Do you think most companies have settled on the best use cases for Gen AI? I know in the early going, that seemed to be a struggle for a lot of companies just to figure out where it makes sense to use it. And, they went back and forth and evaluated a lot of different use cases and sometimes got a little caught up in that and couldn't really make as much progress as they maybe wanted to last year. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing more sophistication, I think, with our customers where the initial ones with Gen AI are, documentation, like how do we speed up our documentation processes or how do we change the customer kind of interaction context? But I'm seeing much more kind of richer use cases that look at kind of these autonomous AI agents that operate within inside of an enterprise and that do a lot of the mundane work that we can then reshift and reskill our teams to focus on. So it's absolutely, I think, shifted, over time where I'm seeing most organizations are essentially getting more mature in terms of the application space that they are choosing.
Okay. Nicholas, a recent Deloitte survey indicated that despite 77% of executives agreeing that their organization should help workers stay employable, only 5% strongly believe that they're investing enough to keep pace with change. Is that consistent with what you have found among your client base? I mean, is there a significant gap around AI skills that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Especially being like an organization that focuses on data and AI and works with some of these Fortune 500 companies, I can say it's absolutely a leadership blind spot. Like most companies that we're talking to or working with, or even ones that I see in the industry, like they talk about upskilling, right? And there's a lot of good programs around there. Like how do you make AI more effective and how do you add that into, maybe it's the finance team and maybe we introduce them to AI, but the skills gap in AI it's not just a challenge. I would say it's more of a crisis for many industries. So we've seen that AI adoption typically stalls when an organization lacks kind of that internal talent to manage and scale these technologies. So it's not just good enough to make people aware, to create kind of an internal, chatbot functionality where they can now access knowledge management documents. It goes beyond that and goes to delivering solutions, actively partnering with the client to build what we call AI literacy and capabilities within their team. Leaders who ultimately ignore the gaps are setting the organization up for failure. So we see that hand in hand where it's a crisis, right? I mean, people need to really take AI seriously, need to take it on their own to reskill and upskill, but we need organizational leadership that also looks at how do we transform that. And there's business processes that within weeks can be completely transformed through AI. And so how do we approach that with our team? And how do we identify those nuggets so that we can transform, but then take that talent and reskill that talent in a different way that provides value for the organization?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. The last time you were on, we talked about environmental sustainability, which I know is a big priority for Fujitsu as an organization. Where do you see AI enabling ESG and helping organizations achieve their objectives there?
I can say that for Fujitsu, ESG is one of our top priorities, if not the top priority. Everything we do and develop has an ESG component, and it doesn't have to just be wherever you stand on the spectrum of, the environmental and social and governance elements. At the end of the day, doing things more efficiently, reducing energy use, reducing waste, improving supply chain transparency, it just makes sense, right? Let's do things smarter, more efficiently. Let's all treat the world better. These are kind of common things that I think we can all rally around. The real game changer though here is what I would call predictive sustainability. And that's using AI to anticipate ultimately and mitigate kind of environmental impacts before they happen. It could be a supply chain impact. There's a very inefficient use across supply chains that we see today. And so if we're more able to better predict the demand and the forecasting, we can be more efficient in terms of how we move things through that process. So for us, ESG isn't just a buzzword. It's baked into the way we design and deploy our AI solutions. And essentially every project that I work on, we do look at what's the sustainable impact, sustainable for the environment, sustainable for the business, sustainable for the human. There's a number of different dimensions to this that at the end of the day, for me and for my team, it's about how do we do things in a more practical way that are less wasteful for the environment.
Yeah. Okay. Nicholas, perhaps you could share a recent project example from the last year where Fujitsu Intelligence delivered a groundbreaking AI solution for a client. Could you give us one or two that just give us a flavor for what you guys are doing in the market?
I mean, I'll speak of one that is driving, I would say, the most demand that we're seeing. And this is, we ended up working across the supply. Think of a supply chain. Most people think of it as your internal supply chain and you're managing products and inventory elements across distribution locations. It could be a retail context. It could be a manufacturing context. It could be a financial context. It could be a public sector, right? But supply chains are consistent across all industry. And the biggest challenge with those is there's a lot of blind spots on that. I've worked with a company where, they're just buying frivolously product because they don't know what's upstream in terms of the supply chain. And some of the newer technologies in our capabilities, we've been able to essentially extend the supply chain outside of the four walls of a company and start looking upstream in terms of supplier. And what that means is it allows you to de-risk your overall supply chain environment. You can buy less product. You can have better cash flow because once product is deployed into the field, you can amortize that or capitalize that. So it allows you to have better cash flow. You don't have stuff sitting in warehouses. And in these instances, you can take the supply chain in itself, not just the transparency in itself, not just adding the AI components on top of it that maybe do demand forecasting, prediction, and whatnot, but you also add this autonomy on top of it, where it could be through your large language models or these, decision-based AI systems where you can start to almost automate the functionality across the supply chain. And what that ends up doing is, we call it kind of a lean management approach. We've always talked about lean or Kaizen, but essentially what we're doing is making these end-to-end supply chain environments more efficient. We have all the bells and whistles plus the guardrails on top of it to kind of protect the environment. But the business impact from that is customer we worked with took 1,000 people that were managing that entire supply chain. We took it down to around 500 people within 12 months. Now it wasn't we also had a reskilling capability. So we reskilled and retooled, but we were able to take that sort of dramatic impact by having those layers of a wider supply chain in context. we also took, they had 300 different part categories. In these part categories, you can use things like O9 for demand forecasting. You can use AutoML, which is an auto machine learning function that Fujitsu's created, where we can predict 80% automatically, like 80% we can predict the demand and the forecasting. And then we focus the remaining 20% through like your hardcore, like OR scientists. But what that means is you can reduce kind of excess inventory. You can slash your kind of operational costs. And we were able to predict 300 part categories in 2 months. And that was like a $10 million savings. So I would say supply chain is my favorite project this year, 2024, 2025. One of the areas that I think is probably going to have the biggest impact, can have the biggest impact. There's so much waste and there's so much we can do, I think, in that space.
Boy, I couldn't agree more. Let me ask you just a follow on to that. I mean, one of the, I think, most attractive things about generative AI is this bi-directional, interaction with information. And it seems to me like, and this may be part of what you guys have done in the supply chain area, but the ability to like ask questions and what if scenarios. What if I use this supplier versus this supplier? Or what if I, outsource this part of my business? What would the impact be? Is that an element of what you're talking about as well in the supply chain in terms of leveraging Gen AI to really give those that manage this end-to-end process more flexibility, more power to really understand opportunities in a real dynamic way?
Absolutely. It's a good point. I'm glad you picked on that one. I didn't cover that. But if you think about disasters, right? We have the wildfires right now that are going on in California, Japan. We're very, unfortunately, accustomed to the fact that we have frequent earthquakes, right? In the southern United States, we have the hurricanes. So within these models, what we've done is leverage Gen AI. Products like Cohere is a really good one that's built for like enterprise AI at scale. Well, we utilize that for simulate. So we'll take seismic data when an earthquake happens. We know where all of our suppliers are. We know our production cycles. We know all the way down to the clients, from supply and inventory all the way down to our clients. And when these disruptions happen, we use Gen AI in these, again, continuing on kind of the supply chain model. We use Gen AI to essentially simulate what that impact and that ripple effect is and help us move, whether it's move inventory from location A to location B. There's a lot of autonomy that can now be, because it learns the workflow and learns the intelligent, it can make those informed decisions. And so something that would, again, in the earthquake example, would take us probably, 48 hours to predict that kind of like, what's the impact on our customers? Within 2 hours, we can now understand that. And so because Gen AI has made a significant impact, so what that means for a client is as soon as something happens, you can alert them. You can try and mitigate it through moving supply around. So it tries to de-risk the downstream supply chain from these kind of environments that happen. So yeah, that's where we're, from our perspective, where Gen AI is making an impact in a specific use case that I've talked about.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Again, back to what you said, I do think the opportunity in this space is so significant. So I agree that there will probably be a lot of strides in that area this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's pivot over a little bit to the quantum computing area, because I know this is part of what you do at Fujitsu Intelligence as well. Maybe it's not as prominent as the AI work has been in the last year or so. But the last time you were on with us, which was 2.5 years ago, we talked about quantum computing and kind of where, the state of the union, how long until, we have something that's commercially available and more practical. Why don't you, if you could, just summarize what have been some of the biggest advancements in quantum computing since we last talked about it 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about a couple of things with that, but I'll talk about market, what is happening in the market. There's a perception, right?
Okay.
We just had, Jensen Huang came out from NVIDIA and said quantum computing is decades away, right? And so it sent a shiver down the kind of the quantum ecosystem in terms of like, the reality of quantum computing. I can tell you that AI has definitely like overshadowed quantum computing. I've been working within the quantum space probably for the last 8 years now, but I'm working with AI much longer. I mean, when we approach a customer problem, AI in itself, Gen AI in itself, or predictive maintenance in itself, or a natural language model, or image processing, image detection, or a quantum-based advanced optimization solver. Like there's no silver bullet for a customer problem. So when we solve a customer problem, we typically look at what we call hybrid algorithms. We've been talking about hybrid algorithms for the last, 2 years. When it comes to quantum, you have a couple of, it's not like black or white. It's not just one day we're going to wake up and everybody's going to have a qubit-based system sitting on their desktop, right? Quantum takes time. And in our heritage, we're in supercomputing, we're in quantum computing, high performance computing, but quantum is the future. And so the thing is, at what time, right? And there's steps before you get to true qubit-based systems that can scale. Qubit is a quantum bit, but before you get to a true qubit-based system that can scale above like an R&D kind of problem, there are advancements in terms of if you can optimize things faster and with a better result, why would you not utilize that technology? So things like quantum-inspired solutions, we've been pushing and deploying that for the last 5 years. We've worked with some of the largest companies, like one of the public case studies I could talk about is, Bayer Crop Science. I mean, we had a production environment, then they were trying to optimize across, hundreds of production environments across thousands of different ingredients that go into these, active ingredients that go into these production environments. And you have 7 layers of these production networks where you build something with a couple of active ingredients that goes into another layer that then goes into another layer and eventually gets to a, kind of a final product. And that had never been solved before. And we can solve that, not just the fact that we can solve it in like 5 minutes or what we say 300 seconds. So that's great. We can solve it very quickly, but we can solve it across the full production environment. But the advantage of like I would say this quantum inspired capabilities is that you can then simulate better. So if you can solve it in 500 or 5 minutes or 300 seconds, you can run hundreds of simulations per day. And what that does is de-risks your overall training cycle. But you're not going to just build a solution with quantum inspired. You're going to have a hybrid AI quantum approach. And, we're committed not just to, AI and quantum computing. We've got the quantum inspired. We've got the quantum simulation that's on our Fugaku supercomputer. We've also got our true quantum qubit-based system. We're building an entire factory environment in Tokyo and our Kawasaki environment that's addressing these kinds of challenges. We believe quantum computing is the future. We put our investments, behind that. And, we're doing things in terms of like molecular simulation, hybrid models. We're looking at how do we speed up the efficiency of AI with quantum precision. So to me, it's the next frontier. Like, is it decades away? I don't think so. I think maybe we're still in the 4 to 5 year kind of mark, but there's advantages today because of the exploration. Just like when we went to the moon, there's advances in terms of technology that impacts aircrafts today. It's good to have that lofty long-term vision. At the same time, there's things that we can use today in business sense that are providing, production scale, like I mentioned at Bayer Crop Science.
It sounds like one of the biggest benefits is going to be around innovation, helping organizations, no matter what business they're in, take these ideas and test them out, as you said, much, much faster, create a digital twin and be able to test out an idea with much more rigor and much faster before you start taking it to market. Is that kind of one area where you think is especially beneficial of quantum when it comes into play in a more scalable way?
That's one aspect. I think the other aspect is quantum computing is teaching us to relearn how we solve problems, right? We've solved so many problems in the past based on constraints. We knew there were compute limitations and constraints. I can't tell you how many problems we've gone into where we've had to really rethink. Portfolio optimization is a good one in the financial services space. We were solving problems in a new way that had traders thinking like, okay, we need to rethink about our methodology and how we're doing trading practices. So I think there's definitely advantages of enhancements to efficiency and productivity. But I think the real value is really blank sheet of paper, rethinking about how we solve these problems and trying to mitigate some of those constraints and bias that has kind of pushed us into certain boxes on what we thought good looked like. So it's really the rationalization of being able to open up Pandora's box of understanding how do we solve new problems.
Okay. And since your team is focused on both AI and quantum, could you go a little deeper on kind of where you see the intersection between AI and quantum computing, even if it's not as pertinent today as it will be in the coming years? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, think of the way I explain it, like maybe to my kids would be a good example. So, AI in itself is good for like the prediction components. There's a number of specific use cases that gear towards, AI, or it could be the image detection components. Quantum computing is good when it comes to advanced optimization. So if you're imagining, let's continue with that supply chain kind of context. If you're looking at predicting the demand of what your customers will need or what the potential, availability of certain raw materials will be, once you understand those different inputs, then you need this kind of brain or this optimization solver that says, okay, what's the finite number of possibilities that you can solve to, and then how do we pick the best solution out of that? So to me, those are the kind of the two differences at the very, very high level. Optimization is how do we find the best of, with a finite set of possibilities, whereas AI is doing the prediction, it could be doing the interfacing, it can doing the automation component, but those are kind of how we see those working in separate realms. And they can be iterative, as well. So, you can have an optimized model that then gets put back into your forecast and you can iterate those. So there's a number of different ways that we look, but that's how I typically explain it, at a very simplistic,
Okay. And what industries have had the biggest interest in quantum so far in your experience, or the ones that you think will leverage it in the fastest manner?
I mean, when we first started, I would say financial services. So industries facing kind of high stakes, complex problems, I would say financial services, because, it's like, financial trading happens 24 hours a day, right? I mean, so you can build optimization models for portfolios and you can iterate and test those very quickly. Pharmaceuticals, back, during the early stages of COVID, and even looking at pre-COVID and looking at different types of, drug discovery, whether it was looking at different proteins that we could bind to. Pharmaceuticals in general, I think, have benefited from advanced optimization. We work with some of the largest pharmaceutical companies out there in terms of, looking at new drugs that we could bring to the market. And then I would say logistics and advanced route, everybody knows the traveling salesman kind of problem, advanced routing. Those are classic kind of optimization problems that gear very well to like what we call a combinatorial optimization problem, which is very well suited for complex kind of optimization. So, from a Fujitsu point of view, we're essentially at the forefront of a lot of these breakthrough problems. And, we have our new facility in Tokyo. There's our quantum facility. And, our goal there is really to accelerate true quantum systems and, work with the industries that will lead that adoption. We see that following kind of the ones that I've mentioned that really, thinking about energy and manufacturing, I think those are really where the future of kind of transformative value it lays.
Okay. Nicholas, your thoughts on NVIDIA coming out and saying that quantum is much further out in the future? What do you think the impacts of that will be? And are people going to take that as the gospel truth?
I mean, no one has a crystal ball, right, for the future. So if we did, I think we would all be doing something maybe different and probably be retired by now. But I mean, I would say, quantum computing is the future, right? It's a matter of when it comes. And like I use the analogy of going to the moon, it's like, and so you have to keep it in balance. Like if we can leverage advanced optimization today through quantum inspired or even small qubit based systems, if we can learn how to solve problems differently or think about problems differently, then I would say there's actual steps that we should be taking towards realizing quantum computing. And those that make the investment, in quantum, I think are best. We want to try and find transferability of advanced optimization and advanced quantum problems in the future. So it's really what's your strategy and how do you make sure that, that you're not just throwing your money away. I mean, AI obviously is super important. I mean, there's a 3-to-1 payback you can see within 9 months on some of these Gen AI cases. So to take that as a business case, very easy optically to see. But quantum computing, I think, with AI, I think is very important. So my view is we're still 4 or 5 years away from like true quantum-based, qubit-based systems solving at scale. My personal view of that.
Okay.
But like I say today, I'm working with many, many companies, quantum-inspired solutions or quantum simulation solution, and there's real value. We're solving real problems at production scale. So I would say, don't take the eye off the ball.
All right. Well, I love the optimism, and I'm gonna side with you. I think it will be a lot sooner than what NVIDIA and others are saying. So we'll keep an eye on this. Well, thanks for letting me delve into quantum. We don't talk about quantum computing a lot on this podcast. In fact, I think I've only talked about it with you 2.5 years ago and now today. So I appreciate you letting me pick your brain on this topic.
Absolutely.
Let's wrap up this conversation, just pulling back, and I would love to hear from you on what trends, technology trends, you believe will have the most significant impact on businesses in the coming year.
Yeah, I mean, generative AI obviously has been a big buzz, right, for the last 18 months. I think companies are still, learning how to harness that. And we're going to see a plethora of applications that come out that are going to be super smart. And what I tell my team is like the convergence of generative AI and what I call decision intelligence and even the advanced optimization, quantum inspired solutions. Like this is the year that will be kind of a convergence of all of those technologies, right? AI will ultimately evolve from a prediction to more of an autonomous decision-making capability, like we talked about in terms of, when these events happen, doing kind of what's the decisioning process and reshaping our operations and kind of our customer engagement. We see it, customer engagement has definitely improved, I would say, over the last 12 to 18 months. Operations, I think, can stand to be a lot of efficiency in operations just in general. I would say quantum-inspired computing will redefine optimization challenges and continue to do that across industry, how we think about problems. Ethical AI, I think, will become a competitive differentiator. And I think businesses that fail to integrate these technologies will find themselves playing catch up in a world that's moving faster than ever, right? And so, that's the positive side. The negative side is, I think people are going to realize with large language models and generative AI that a lot of people have been putting way too much sensitive information into these models. There's going to be a blowback. There's going to be a sense of, understanding and looking across organizations. And that's a fear, right? Because unless you have like a data management model, unless you have the guardrails around these large language models, it's going to be painful, right? And so that's where I think once that happens, I think organizations are going to really gravitate towards how are large language and generative AI being utilized in the organization. And they're going to focus on things like security and compliance and data privacy. And you're going to see that there are solutions out in the market today that we're working with customers on, but like you're going to see companies where they start embracing that, if you don't have access to a certain amount of data, well, that shouldn't come back in your response from a natural language kind of interface. So it will be a negative downside in terms of like, you'll see those blowbacks, but there's companies out there that are already supporting more compliance and regulatory environments around Gen AI that if you haven't started looking at that from an AI leadership perspective, I would highly recommend that you do that today.
Fantastic. Well, Nicholas, it's always fun talking with you. I really appreciate you coming back on the podcast, and I wish you and your team all the success in the world this year. Congratulations on the new role, and I look forward to having you back on in the future for sure to talk about these things. And maybe when quantum, hits the prime time, we'll have you back to lead the charge, because you're probably you have the most expertise there of anyone I have in my network for sure. So,
well, thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'd love to come back, and I'd love to discuss next year, like where we've been successful this year. Because at the end of the day, we're leading a premier data and AI business in North America, the largest market in the world. And we have some of the most incredible, like I say, technological tapestry behind us that I'm excited. 2025 is going to be an amazing year for our customers and for Fujitsu.
Perfect. Well, thanks again. And thanks for joining us. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.